The sudden silence was unbearable. 80 colleagues stared at their laps as Reed stood at the front of the conference room, pointing at my name on his restructuring slide. "Frankly, your position is obsolete," he announced, his voice echoing against the glass walls. "We're moving forward with younger talent." I sat frozen. 23 years of dedicated work dismissed in 15 seconds. My chest tightened as if someone had wrapped wire around my ribs and was slowly twisting it. "Handcrafting luxury items is inefficient," Reed continued, gesturing toward his projected charts with manicured hands that had never created anything but presentations. "Our new automated systems will increase output by 300%. Artisans like you represent our past, not our future." A wave of heat crawled up my neck. 23 years. I'd started when this company created only 12 bespoke pieces annually. Now we produce thousands, each still bearing the subtle marks of human hands, my hands. The quarterly staff meeting had become my public execution. People studied their notebooks, avoiding eye contact. I searched for allies among faces I'd trained, mentored, even hired. Not one would meet my gaze. "We'll be transitioning your remaining team members to support roles for the new production system," Reed said, clicking to the next slide. "Your final day will be Friday." I gripped the edge of my chair, knuckles white. This was happening. Really happening. Then a chair scraped at the back of the room. Every head turned as an elderly man slowly stood, the founder, who hadn't attended a staff meeting in years. Leaning on his cane, he cleared his throat. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" His voice was quiet but carried. Reed straightened his tie. "Sir, with respect, I understand the sentimentality, but 3 decades ago," the founder interrupted, "when I lost everything in a warehouse fire, this woman worked without pay for 8 months. She slept on my workshop floor. When buyers abandoned us, her craftsmanship brought them back. I remembered those dark months, the despair, the uncertainty." "But that was then," Reed protested. "Markets evolve." The founder limped forward. "Last month, when the Sultan requested 30 custom pieces within 2 weeks, who completed that impossible order?" Reed shifted. "That was exceptional circumstances. And when the First Lady's accessory tore minutes before a state function, who repaired it so perfectly no one noticed?" "Wait, that's not what happened." That's the fantasy that played in my head as Reed continued speaking, outlining how my division would be eliminated, how the heritage techniques would be preserved only as marketing material. What really happened was worse. No one stood up. No one defended me. The founder wasn't even there. And I sat silently, my face burning, as 2 decades of excellence was erased in a 15-minute presentation. "I want to ask you something. Have you ever had that moment where everything you've built comes crashing down around you? When you're made to feel worthless in front of everyone you respect? If this story resonates with you, hit that like button now and subscribe to hear what happened next, because what I did changed everything. My name is Willa. I'm 53 years old, and until that meeting, I was the head artisan at one of the most prestigious luxury goods companies in the world. Not that you would know it from looking at me. I don't wear flashy clothes or drive an expensive car. What I have are hands that can tell the difference between materials just by touch, eyes that can spot a flaw invisible to most, and patience cultivated through 23 years of perfecting my craft. I started as an apprentice when we made everything by hand, when each creation took weeks, not hours, when our clients waited months for pieces that would become family heirlooms. Reed had arrived 6 months earlier, bringing his degrees in algorithms. He'd never created anything with his hands. He was 36, ambitious, and had the ear of our CEO, Preston. After the meeting, I walked back to my workshop alone. My team avoided eye contact, afraid they'd be next. The reorganization would begin the following Monday. My new role would be Heritage Consultant, a meaningless title with half my previous salary and none of the authority. I sat at my workbench, running my fingers over the tools I'd used for decades. Each worn handle had shaped countless masterpieces. Each carried stories in its grain. "I need the keys to the archive," a voice interrupted. Eliza, Reed's assistant, stood in my doorway, 20-something, sharp, and entirely aligned with the new vision. "The archive stays locked for a reason," I said, not looking up. "Those are prototype designs dating back 80 years. Reed wants everything digitized by next week," she said, hand extended. "The archive, your patterns, everything. Those patterns were created by hand," I said. "Many don't even have written instructions. They require experienced interpretation." "We'll figure it out," she said with the confidence of someone who has never failed at anything meaningful. The keys, please. I handed them over, watching as she walked away, already texting on her phone. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Reed's face as he said obsolete, like I was a broken machine, not a human who had poured my life into this company. Not someone who had missed family gatherings to meet impossible deadlines. Not someone who had trained dozens of artisans who now worked for our competitors. By morning, I had made my decision. If they wanted me gone, I would go. But not like this. Not erased and diminished. I arrived early, before the cleaning crew had finished. My workshop was already half emptied. My tools piled in boxes labeled Heritage Archive. The machines that would replace us hummed in the adjacent room, their operators still being trained. I checked my watch. I had 30 minutes before anyone else would arrive. Opening my personal cabinet, I removed a small wooden box containing the tools my mentor had given me when I completed my apprenticeship, tools that predated the company itself. They couldn't take these from me. As I closed the cabinet, a shadow fell across the doorway. "You're early," Reed said, leaning against the frame. "Saying goodbye to the old ways?" I met his gaze steadily. Something like that. He stepped inside, looking around with the expression of someone inspecting an ancient relic. Mild curiosity mixed with the certainty that nothing here had relevance to modern life. "I hope you understand this isn't personal," he said. "It's simply evolution. The clients don't care about handcrafted quality anymore. They want the label, the status. We can deliver that faster and cheaper." I placed my box of tools in my bag. "Is that what Preston believes too?" Something flickered across Reed's face. "Preston trusts my judgment. My methods brought success to 3 other heritage brands. How are those brands doing now?" I asked. "Still thriving?" His smile tightened. "Change requires sacrifice. Sometimes the old must make way for the new." As he turned to leave, he paused. "By the way, your team will be reporting to Eliza starting today. I've moved your final week to administrative leave. HR will contact you about the exit process." I stood alone in my half-empty workshop, the space I had occupied for over 2 decades. Through the window, I could see Reed walking toward the executive building, already moving on to his next conquest. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had no intention of going quietly, because while Reed saw me as obsolete, he had overlooked something critical about people with my experience. We know where all the weak points are. 3 days into my administrative leave, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by newspaper clippings, old company newsletters, and notes I'd compiled over 23 years. My hands moved methodically, organizing information while my mind calculated possibilities. My phone vibrated with another message from my former team. "They're ruining everything," wrote Gina, my protege of 7 years. "The machine tore through a limited edition hide yesterday. $500,000 wasted." I placed the phone screen down without responding. Gina had sat silently during my humiliation. They all had. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Eleanor, the company's HR director, standing on my porch with a leather portfolio, the same portfolio I'd handcrafted for executive gifts 5 years ago. "Willa," she said when I opened the door, "I brought your severance package." Her eyes avoided mine as she stepped inside. Eleanor had been with the company almost as long as I had. We'd once shared lunch every Wednesday. "Tea?" I offered, my voice deliberately calm. "I can't stay," she said, placing the portfolio on my counter. "Everything's explained in the documents. The separation agreement needs your signature by Friday." I nodded, not touching the portfolio. "How are things?" Eleanor hesitated, conflict visible in her expression. "Challenging. Reed's moving fast. The board seems impressed with the projected numbers. And the quality issues? There's a learning curve," she said carefully. "Preston believes it will stabilize." "Preston hasn't been on the workshop floor in years," I said. "Has he actually examined the new products?" Eleanor fidgeted with her bracelet. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but there's an emergency meeting tomorrow. The Miyamoto order was completed using the new process, and they've rejected the entire shipment. It's a 7-figure loss." I kept my expression neutral, but inside, a tiny flame kindled. The Miyamoto family had been clients for 3 generations. Their standards were exacting. "I'm sorry to hear that." Eleanor moved toward the door, then paused. "Reed's blaming your team. Says they've been sabotaging the transition." The flame grew hotter. "My team wouldn't need to sabotage anything. The machines can't do what we do." "Maybe," Eleanor sighed, "but Reed has Preston convinced this is just resistance to change. Anyone who raises concerns is labeled as difficult. But after she left, I opened the portfolio. The severance was insultingly small. 6 weeks' pay for 23 years. The agreement included a non-disparagement clause and a prohibition against working for competitors for 2 years. They wanted me silenced and sidelined. That evening, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Xavier, the founder's son and nominal chairman of the board. At 65, he had his father's sharp eyes but none of his vision. He'd been largely absent from operations for years, focusing instead on his yacht collection and third wife. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice carrying the slight tremor of age or anxiety. I led him to my living room, where he lowered himself into an armchair with a grunt. "I'll be direct," Xavier said. "Things aren't going well since your departure." "It's been 3 days," I noted. 3 very expensive days. He leaned forward. "The Miyamoto rejection is just the beginning. 2 other major clients are threatening to cancel standing orders." I waited, saying nothing. "Reed assures us it's temporary," Xavier continued. "But I'm not convinced. My father always said you were the heart of our craftsmanship." "Your father has been dead for 12 years, I said flatly. "And in that time, you've cut our quality control budget every year while demanding higher output." Xavier flinched. "Business realities. We're managed without compromising our standards," I interrupted. "Until Reed." "Yes, well," Xavier cleared his throat. "That's why I'm here. We want you to come back, as a consultant, to help smooth this transition." I studied his face. Xavier had never visited my workshop, had never learned the names of a single artisan. Yet here he was, in my living room, asking for help. "What does Reed say about this offer?" Xavier's hesitation told me everything. "Reed doesn't know I'm here. He's convinced his approach is right, and Preston supports him, but I have concerns. So I'd be undermining the man who publicly humiliated me, while having no actual authority? You'd be preserving your legacy," Xavier countered. "And if things improve, who knows what might happen with Reed's position?" I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "I'll consider it." After Xavier left, I returned to my kitchen table, and the materials spread across it. His visit had confirmed what I suspected. Cracks were already forming in Reed's vision. But returning as a powerless consultant wasn't my plan. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "The archive has been emptied. All designs digitized. Originals headed to storage. Thought you should know." I smiled for the first time in days. The pieces were moving into place. What Reed and Preston didn't understand was that our company's value wasn't in the products themselves, but in the knowledge behind them. Knowledge that lived in the hands and minds of artisans like me. Knowledge that couldn't be digitized or automated. Knowledge that, over 23 years, I had carefully documented in ways only I could access. The next morning, I called Preston's assistant and requested a meeting with the CEO. Not next week, not tomorrow, today. The time for silence was over. Preston's assistant scheduled me for 4:30 p.m., the dead zone between afternoon meetings and evening obligations. A time slot reserved for matters considered necessary, but not urgent. I arrived at the headquarters 20 minutes early, pausing in the lobby where my designs were displayed in glass cases, pieces that had defined luxury for 2 decades. As I checked in with security, a group of young employees passed by, glancing at me with uncomfortable recognition. News travels fast. "Willa," Preston greeted me from behind his desk, not bothering to stand. "I didn't expect to see you back so soon." At 58, Preston had transformed from a sales director to CEO over 15 years, riding the company's success that artisans like me had built. He'd been my ally once, before quarterly targets became his religion. "I'm surprised Xavier didn't mention our conversation," I said, taking a seat. Preston's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Xavier visited you? That's interesting." The Miyamoto rejection concerned him. "A temporary setback," Preston dismissed with a wave. "Reed has already implemented adjustments to the process." I nodded. "That's actually why I'm here. I've been thinking about ways to smooth this transition." For 30 minutes, I outlined a compromise, keeping a small team of master artisans for special commissions, while gradually introducing automation for standard lines. Preston listened, occasionally making notes. "Your proposal has merit," he finally said, "but it contradicts Reed's vision of comprehensive modernization." "Reed's vision is costing you clients," I countered. "Miyamoto isn't an isolated case." Preston's expression hardened. "Reed came highly recommended. His methods dramatically increased profitability at Westbrook." "And what happened to Westbrook 2 years after he left?" Preston shifted in his chair. We both knew the answer. Westbrook had filed for bankruptcy after their quality collapsed, and clients abandoned them. Different circumstances, he said. Look, Willa, I appreciate your concern for the company, but we've committed to this direction. The initial turbulence will pass, and if it doesn't, then we'll address it, he said firmly, but not by reverting to outdated methods. I felt a flash of anger at the word outdated, Reed's influence evident in Preston's vocabulary. I understand, I said, standing. I just wanted to offer my perspective before finalizing my departure. Preston seemed relieved. I appreciate that. Your severance package is generous, considering the circumstances. 6 weeks for 23 years, I said. Yes, very generous. His eyes narrowed at my tone. The industry is changing, Willa. We all need to adapt. As I reached the door, I paused. One last thing. The Larson Commission, has it been started yet? Preston frowned. The anniversary gift? I believe Reed assigned it to the new production line as a test case. I nodded. Interesting choice. Mr. Larson specifically requested my work. He's ordered anniversary gifts for his wife from me for 15 years. I'm sure Reed communicated the changes to him, Preston said, though uncertainty flashed across his face. Of course, I smiled. I look forward to seeing how it turns out. As the door closed behind me, I heard Preston picking up his phone. The next morning, I received a call from Eleanor. Reed wants to meet with you, she said, her voice tense. Today, if possible. What about? The Larson Commission. Apparently there's been a misunderstanding. I agreed to a 2 p.m. meeting, then spent the morning methodically organizing my apartment. By noon, my dining room had been transformed into a makeshift office, with files sorted chronologically and color-coded by project type. At 1:30, my phone rang again. Willa, it's Gina. Can you talk? I have a meeting with Reed soon, I said. I know. That's why I'm calling. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He's been in crisis mode since yesterday. The Larson rejection hit him hard. I smiled to myself. Rejection? Already? Mr. Larson came in personally this morning. He took one look at the prototype and walked out, said he'd take his business elsewhere unless you personally handled his commission. How unfortunate, I said mildly. Reed blamed us, Gina continued. Said we didn't transfer your notes properly. But Willa, there were no detailed notes for the Larson pieces. You always created those from memory. Yes, I confirmed. After 15 years of working with Mr. Larson, I knew his preferences intimately. There was a pause. I should have spoken up at that meeting. Gina finally said, we all should have. Yes, I agreed. You should have. The silence stretched uncomfortably. He's planning to offer you a contract position, Gina finally continued. Just for special clients like Larson, but with strict limitations. I see. Be careful, Gina warned. Reed's been researching your history with the company, asking strange questions about your access to designs and client relationships. After hanging up, I dressed carefully in a simple gray dress that I'd made myself, a detail only those who truly understood craftsmanship would notice. Reed's new office occupied the space that had once been our design studio. The walls, once covered with sketches and material samples, now displayed digital renderings and productivity charts. Willa, he greeted me with professional warmth that didn't reach his eyes. Thank you for coming in on short notice. I took the offered seat. Eleanor mentioned the Larson Commission. Yes, Reed said, leaning forward. There seems to have been a miscommunication regarding Mr. Larson's expectations. Not a miscommunication, I corrected. A failure to understand the nature of true craftsmanship. Reed's smile tightened. Nevertheless, Mr. Larson is an important client, which brings me to my proposal. The offer was, as Gina had described, a limited contract position for legacy clients who specifically requested my work. The hourly rate was fair, but the terms were restrictive. I would have no access to the main workshop, no contact with my former team, and all designs would become company property. You'd work in a private studio we're setting up, Reed explained, with full surveillance, of course, for quality control purposes. Of course, I echoed. And my role would be limited to these special commissions? Exactly, Reed said. Eventually, we'll transition even these clients to our new processes. But for now, this arrangement serves everyone's interests. I studied his face, noting the tension around his eyes. This wasn't a victory for Reed, it was damage control. And if I decline, then we respect your decision, he said smoothly. But I should mention that Mr. Larson was quite adamant. He's threatened to share his disappointment with other long-term clients. The threat was clear: return on their terms, or be blamed for the loss of prestigious customers. I'll need time to consider, I said. Of course, Reed nodded. But we'll need your answer by tomorrow. Mr. Larson's anniversary is approaching, and we've promised delivery. As I stood to leave, Reed added, one more thing. During your consultation, we'd expect complete confidentiality regarding our new production methods. No discussing company changes with clients. You want me to pretend nothing has changed? We want you to focus on your specific assignments, he clarified. The broader company vision isn't your concern anymore. I nodded slowly. I understand completely. That evening, as dusk settled over my neighborhood, I sat on my porch watching lightning flicker on the horizon. A storm was coming. My phone buzzed with messages from former colleagues, each hinting at deteriorating conditions at the company, quality issues mounting, client complaints escalating, Reed's temper fraying. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Willa, answered a gruff voice. It's been a while. Hello, Bernard, I said. I think it's time we had that conversation you've been wanting to have. Bernard Laurent had been trying to recruit me for his rival company for over a decade. Each offer had been more generous than the last. I'm listening, he said, surprise evident in his voice. Not over the phone, I replied, and I have specific conditions. As we arranged to meet, thunder rumbled closer. The storm was approaching faster than expected. Just like my plan, the meeting with Bernard took place at a small cafe 20 miles from the company headquarters. At 70, Bernard Laurent still maintained the sharp eye for detail that had made him a respected competitor in the luxury goods market. So, he said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, you've finally decided to join me? I sipped my tea. Not exactly. Bernard's bushy eyebrows rose. Then why are we here? I'm starting my own atelier, I said, and I need your help. For the next hour, I outlined my vision. A small, specialized studio focusing on true craftsmanship. Not mass production disguised as luxury, but genuine artistry. Bernard listened, occasionally asking pointed questions about financing, infrastructure, and most importantly, clients. You'll need a substantial investment, he noted, and competing against your former employer won't be easy. I'm not planning to compete with them, I replied. I'm planning to outlast them. Bernard studied me for a long moment. You know something. It wasn't a question. I know many things, I said, including how Reed's modernization is alienating our most valuable clients. And you're willing to wait for the collapse? I'm willing to be ready when it happens, I corrected. Bernard leaned back, fingers drumming on the table. What exactly do you need from me? Workspace, suppliers, and your word that you won't poach my clients when I secure them. Bold to assume you'll secure any, he challenged. I reached into my bag and removed a small notebook. This contains confirmations from 12 clients who will follow me wherever I go, including Miyamoto and Larson. Bernard's eyes widened as he scanned the names. These represent nearly 40% of your former company's custom orders. 43%, I corrected. I've been their primary point of contact for years. Many don't even know the company name. They know me. And your non-compete clause? Applies to working for competitors, I said, not to founding my own studio. Bernard closed the notebook, a smile spreading across his weathered face. You've thought this through, for longer than they realize. The next morning, I called Reed and declined his offer. His response was immediate. You're making a serious mistake, he warned. This industry is changing. There won't be a place for artisans like you in the future. Perhaps, I said, but I'm not concerned about the future right now. I'm concerned about Mr. Larson's anniversary gift. It's in 3 weeks, correct? Reed's pause confirmed my information. We'll manage. I'm sure you will, I said. Please give Preston my regards. 2 days later, I signed a lease on a modest workshop space that Bernard had connected me with. It was smaller than my previous workspace, but flooded with natural light, perfect for detailed handwork. I spent the week setting up, ordering materials, and designing my new business cards, which read simply, Willa, Artisan. On day 8 after leaving the company, the first call came. Is this Willa? The voice belonged to Mrs. Hawthorne, a client of 15 years. It is. They told me you'd retired, she said, irritation clear in her voice. But my assistant discovered you've opened your own studio. I'd like to commission a piece. By the end of the week, I had appointments with 7 long-standing clients. None had been informed of my departure. They'd been told I was unavailable or had moved on to other projects. Meanwhile, My former colleagues kept me updated on the deteriorating situation at the company. The machines Reed had installed continued to produce substandard work. The remaining artisans were being blamed for sabotage when they pointed out quality issues. Client complaints mounted. Gina called on a Sunday evening, her voice hushed. There's an emergency board meeting tomorrow. The Larson piece was delivered yesterday. And? It was rejected again. Mr. Larson went straight to Preston, threatened to contact business publications about the company's fraudulent quality claims. It's chaos here, Willa. I thanked her for the information, then spent the evening preparing for what would come next. The following afternoon, Eleanor called. The board wants to meet with you, she said, her voice carrying the weariness of someone caught in a corporate storm. Tomorrow morning. What about? They wouldn't say exactly, but Xavier was present, and he insisted on contacting you. I agreed to the meeting, then called Bernard to update him. Be careful, he warned. They may offer you something substantial to return, or they may try to intimidate me about client contacts, I countered. Either way, you're in a stronger position than they realize, Bernard said. The clients who've contacted you did so independently. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the company's main conference room, the same room where Reed had humiliated me weeks earlier. I dressed carefully in a handcrafted outfit that subtly displayed techniques unique to my work, a silent statement of value. The room fell quiet as I entered. Around the mahogany table sat the 9 board members, including Xavier. Preston occupied the chair at the head, with Reed to his right, a portfolio opened before him. Their expressions ranged from concern to barely concealed hostility. Thank you for coming, Willa, Preston began. We wanted to discuss some concerns that have arisen since your departure. I took the empty seat directly across from Reed. What concerns specifically? Xavier cleared his throat. Several of our most valuable clients have expressed dissatisfaction with recent commissions. Some have canceled standing orders. That's unfortunate, I said. Reed leaned forward. We have reason to believe you've been contacting these clients directly, disparaging our new production methods. I haven't contacted anyone, I said truthfully. They found me. Found you? Preston interrupted. How would they even know you'd left? Perhaps when their calls and requests specifically for me went unanswered, I suggested. Or when they received machine-made products after years of handcrafted quality. Reed's face flushed. The quality issues are temporary. The quality issues are inherent, I corrected. You cannot automate what takes 20 years to learn. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Xavier finally spoke. The board has discussed the situation at length. We believe a recalibration of our approach may be necessary. Preston shifted in his chair. What Xavier means is that we're considering maintaining a small artisan division for specific clients while continuing our modernization elsewhere. And you want me to lead this division? I stated. Yes, Xavier confirmed. With appropriate compensation and authority, of course. I looked at each face around the table. Most couldn't meet my eyes. I'm afraid that won't be possible, I said. I've established my own studio. Reed's laugh was sharp. A small workshop can't compete with our infrastructure. I don't need to compete, I replied. I only need to serve my clients. Your clients? Reed's voice rose. They are company clients. Your contact with them was as a company representative. I smiled for the first time. Actually, that's not entirely accurate. I opened my bag and removed a bound document, sliding it across the table to Preston. What's this? He asked, flipping through the pages. My original employment contract, I said, along with every amendment over 23 years. You'll notice Section 12, Paragraph 3, specifically addresses client relationships. Preston found the page, his expression shifting as he read. For master artisans, I continued, client relationships developed through personal craftsmanship remain the intellectual property of the artisan, not the company. This clause was created by the founder to ensure artisans would be motivated to develop long-term client loyalty. Xavier leaned forward. Is this accurate? Preston nodded slowly. It appears to be, though this clause hasn't been included in contracts for at least 15 years. But it was in mine, I said, and never amended. Reed snatched the contract, scanning it with growing alarm. This is an oversight, clearly not intended to. It's legally binding, interrupted the company's legal counsel, who had been silent until now. I reviewed these documents when Miss Willa's severance was prepared. The clause is valid. The revelation hung in the air. I had not stolen clients. I had retained relationships that legally belonged to me. Furthermore, I continued, I've never disparaged this company. I simply informed clients who contacted me that I now work independently. Preston closed his eyes briefly. How many? 17 so far, I said, representing approximately 60% of your custom order revenue. The number sent a visible shock through the room. Reed's face had gone from flushed to ashen. This is unacceptable, he stammered. We'll pursue legal action. On what grounds? I interrupted. I've violated no agreements. I've merely exercised rights preserved in my contract. Xavier turned to Preston. We need to discuss this privately. Preston nodded, then addressed me. Willa, would you mind stepping out while we confer? I gathered my belongings and walked to the door, then paused. There's something else you should know. All eyes turned to me. The techniques I developed over 23 years, the proprietary methods that made our products unique, those belong to me as well. Section 14, paragraph 7. Techniques and methods developed by master artisans remain the intellectual property of said artisans unless specifically commissioned and documented by the company. Reed jumped to his feet. That's absurd. You developed those techniques while employed here. I did, I agreed, but the company never documented them as required by the contract. In fact, Reed recently had all my handwritten notes digitized and the originals placed in storage, without proper documentation of ownership. The legal counsel closed his eyes, confirming my interpretation with his silence. I opened the door. I'll wait outside. 40 minutes later, Xavier emerged. We'd like to continue this conversation, he said. Perhaps over lunch? The board had reached a decision. They would not pursue legal action against me, recognizing that it would only further damage their reputation with elite clients. Instead, they proposed a partnership. My new atelier would become an exclusive, high-end division of the company, operating independently but under their umbrella. Reed was notably absent from lunch. By dessert, I learned he had been placed on administrative leave pending review. The board has concerns about his approach, Xavier explained carefully, and about certain representations he made regarding client retention. I declined their partnership offer. I prefer true independence, I told them, but I'm open to a limited collaboration on specific projects. We eventually negotiated an arrangement where I would accept select commissions that required resources beyond my new studio's capabilities. The company would provide materials and infrastructure. I would provide the craftsmanship and client relationship management. 1 week later, Reed was officially removed from his position. The press release cited strategic differences as the reason for his departure. 2 days after that, I received a text from Eleanor. Reed's modernization cost the company $12.8 million in lost orders and rejected merchandise. Your legal contract just saved your legacy and possibly the company. 6 months later, my small atelier was thriving. I had hired 2 apprentices and was teaching them the techniques that had taken me decades to perfect. Several former colleagues had reached out about joining me, including Gina. I considered each request carefully, remembering their silence during my public humiliation. Bernard visited my studio on a crisp autumn morning. You've created something remarkable here, he observed, examining a piece I was completing for Mrs. Hawthorne. I created nothing new, I corrected. I preserved something valuable and destroyed Reed's career in the process, Bernard added with a sly smile. I set down my tools. Reed destroyed his own career by devaluing what he didn't understand. Bernard nodded thoughtfully. The oldest lesson in business: never underestimate what appears obsolete to your untrained eye. As I look back now, I realize my story isn't really about revenge. It's about value. The value of expertise, of patience, of tradition. Reed saw me as obsolete because he couldn't see the worth in what I'd spent decades perfecting. His mistake wasn't modernization. It was dismissing the foundation that made the company successful in the first place. If you've ever been undervalued or pushed aside for the new and improved, I hope my story reminds you that true quality endures. Experience matters. Craftsmanship matters. And sometimes, the most powerful response to being called obsolete isn't loud resistance, it's quietly proving your lasting value. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of resilience and reinvention. Share in the comments a time when you were underestimated and how you proved your worth. Because in a world obsessed with the new, there's profound power in honoring what endures.